Seeing at 6 p.m., I'd like to call the September 6, 2023 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council in order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening and ask that if you're able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sonart,
Here.
Councilmember Naxted,
Here.
Councilmember Dothit,
Here.
Vice Mayor Baisden,
Here.
Councilmember Askin,
Here.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
and Councilmember Winger.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up, we have approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor. I move for approval of the agenda and the consent agenda, along with the add item
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we
G1
called-
Resolution 2023-49 postponement memo.
Yeah, let me back up there and just make everybody aware, just before we do get to agenda approval, there should be a laydown in front of you with requested additions to the packet, action item G1, resolution number 2023-49, postponement memo that was requested by our planning director. So with that, it's been moved for the agenda.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested.
I'll
Is that
second
seconded?
that.
Is there anybody on the body that would like to amend the agenda or consent agenda this time? Seeing none, I'd like to ask the clerk to read that consent agenda into the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Approval of the special meeting minutes of August 11th, 2023, and the regular meeting minutes of August 16th, 2023. New business action approval, bills to be ratified, brought to you by the administration. Action approval item, non-objection to renewal of a beverage dispensary liquor license for Kenai Joe's Tap House LLC, DBA Kenai Joe's Tap House LLC, license number 626, brought to you by the city clerk. Action approval, non-objection to the transfer of ownership of a restaurant eating place liquor license and a restaurant designation permit for Jersey Subs Alaska LLC, doing business as Jersey Subs Alaska, license number 5900, brought to you by the city clerk. Action approval, non-objection to the renewal of a marijuana product manufacturing facility license for Urban Extracts LLC, doing business as Urban Extracts LLC, license number 14432, brought to you by the city clerk. Action approval, special use permit for Corvus Airlines, Inc., DBA Raven Alaska LLC, for use of 1,200 square feet of warm storage of a de-iced vehicle, brought to you by the administration. Action approval, consent to assignment and assumption of lease agreement of Lot 3, Block 1, General Aviation, apron number 1, amended to Vicky L. Tyler, brought to you by the administration. And introduction of ordinance number 3370, 2023, accepting and appropriating fiscal year 2023 funds from the Sign Research Foundation for the Sign Research Foundation Scholarship Program, brought to you by the administration. Public hearing scheduled for September 20th, 2023, and that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that's on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Is there anybody online, Madam Clerk?
There are no hands raised
Okay,
online.
very good. Seeing none, unanimous consent was requested for approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that's so moved. Next up, tonight we have no scheduled administrative reports. We have no scheduled public comments. That brings us to item D, unscheduled public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Mr. Navarre, would you just please, if you would just state your name and whether you are a resident of the city of Kenai?
Thank you. My name is Tim Navarre. I live in the city of Kenai at 719 Sycamore. I talked to you today on an unhappy subject. I've dealt with a lot of things And after Soldotna's little issue with police and 2 sets of rules for other people, just like me, I was arrested for domestic violence while I was vice mayor of the city of Kenai. The case was dropped literally 12 days later, unheard of, but that's because there was nothing there. But I was still arrested, but yet there seems to be a double standard. And I can put up with myself, but when they go after my son because of actions I take, then I take it serious. And I haven't sued. I've been in, talked to the city attorney a number of times over a number of years. Right here in the city of Kenai, the police, I've proven without a doubt, my brother was in with me, that the city of Kenai lied at a grand jury. Lied, not made up a story, didn't exaggerate it, lied. And yet they can give charges and other people over nothing in retaliation. The same officer that, and I won't say any names, but the same officer that did that citation that you see in front of you, I didn't even know. You have 1 day to respond, 1 business day. And there isn't even a charge. You and me, when we get arrested or get a citation, we know what it's about. Nothing. Ask for a copy of the report. It's not written yet. So I have to call within the 1 day, and I do. And the gal at the other end says, "Oh, it's no big." They get 30 days to write the report, and then we have 30 days to find whether it's sufficient, and we go from there. So don't worry. Even though I had an attorney up the line because I didn't know what to expect. If you read it, it says your child was arrested. If that's the policy we have in our city, I can tell you exactly what my son, the same 3 kids were with him all 3 times. They played ding dong ditch one time this summer, and I reprimanded them, and so did the other parents. They had a curfew where they walked out of the house after, when they were sleeping over at one of the other friends' house, and they went out at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, walked down to the store and came back. Didn't create any problems, but got a curfew. And the second one was painting on the sidewalk, all 3 of them, but only, I didn't know, 3 minutes goes pretty fast.
Yeah,
But
it does. Yep, you can go and wrap up.
if I could real quick, I just want to say, the reason those pictures, I wanted you to see because that's what seemed to have triggered it. There was no words, there was no anything, and certainly I addressed him. The other thing about the basketball hoop there and that is that the officer had called me before this incident and said my neighbor complained about Tristan playing basketball. All summer long he's been getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning by himself, playing basketball, and he plays at night. And all of a sudden, when he called me up and he's talking to me, he's telling me I should be cited or arrested for a 12-year-old playing basketball by himself on a city street. A week later, the same neighbor called, and this time they came out instead of being on the phone. And I'll give that officer some credit because I wasn't even going to talk to him because I was mad that they're starting it all over again. But at least when he heard me, I said, listen, I'm going to stand up for my 12-year-old playing basketball. He's motivated. He's doing something positive. If that's the city of Kenai's, then citation me so I can fight it. If there's some rule or some law that I'm breaking, do it. And then the same officer is the one that wrote this up after just spray painting and that. If we're sending kids, if the police aren't using the opportunity to engage as a good police officer with young kids and and give them a learning lesson instead of you're under arrest for spray painting, and that's down, if you didn't know, Float Plain Road. There's not a lot of traffic. Doesn't excuse the action of spraying on a road, but it's very little, and as you can see, you see graffiti all over this town. But if we're sending kids, instead of using an example, to use it as a learning experience and make a difference in their life so they trust the police and they'll communicate. In this particular case, they separated all three of them. The parents weren't called. They got them to talk on each other, and they did it. I just can't believe that they have no rights either. And if you read that, that's why I'm glad I got this. But the state needs to change their policy. To give a person one business day to respond to a citation is crazy. And this is an arrest. And then you call them up and they say, don't worry about it. The police have 30 days to tell you what it's about. And then they don't even share it with us when they get it. They said there's a procedure you have to go through to get it from the police. That isn't the kind of Kenai Police Force I want in this town in working with our young kids and doing it. And I realize you'll think there's another side to the story, and I hope you hear it. Go into executive session. Scott can tell you, I'm not a bad guy, but I've been accused of selling and dealing drugs. I sold a car in March of 2019, I want to say, and in a police report, because the guy just bought it from me that day, they pulled that car over, and the police report twice said, because of my known knowledge of Timothy Navarre being involved in drugs, that's why I was pulling him over. After that, they said, we apologize, that shouldn't have been in the report. Those are just some of the things I've dealt with. And my brother he died, and then we brought it to the city because you couldn't bring it up when an ongoing case is going on to argue it. But in a grand jury, the police lied. And yet they can go take a little kid, a 12-year-old kid, give him a hard time about playing basketball on a city street, and at the same time put them this, and nothing happens to them. You know, we maybe need to look at a citizen's review or something. I don't know what I'm going to do after this is done, because I'm sure I have to wait for it to be completed, because there's a state board of some kind. But I'm disappointed. And this is retaliation. I got a stop sign. Blew through it, they said. I proved without a doubt you can't even see the stop sign. What happened 3 weeks later? The same policeman goes by me like this when I came out of this road, didn't turn on his lights, waited till I guess he saw me, pulled me over, and then he told me I'm the same one that stopped you before. You didn't come to a complete stop. He ended up not writing me a ticket. That's after he called for somebody at the office to come out to the thing after I said I'm not interested, just give me the ticket. And instead they write me a ticket for a cracked windshield. Had a little crack at the bottom. It was being replaced anyway. I already had it ordered. It was being replaced. And I know I have to finish up, and I
Mr.
will.
Well,
But
I'd say I'd let
my
you go
point is,
on quite a while
even
here,
in
so.
that, I've been harassed again, where and then they just let it go. I go to court and I say this isn't right, but I'm not going to have my son be, and if this is the policies of the city of Kenai, you need to look at it. Because I guarantee you, I'll allow any information to be shared if that's what you need to do to get that corrected, because kids should not be reported to juvenile for a little spray paint and that. He hasn't shoplifted, he didn't throw rocks through windows, he didn't do any of that.
Tim, I'm going to open it up for
All right.
questions from
You-
the body.
You
Is
don't
there-
want them to answer questions, but
Okay.
if they
Well, I
have
just
any, I'll
see-
certainly
I
answer.
see Councilmember Winger's lights on, so.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Navarre. I see that you did scratch the date out. When was the date of this occurrence
The August 25th,
of this year?
correct.
Okay, and then one other question, if I may. So the spray paint incident that you're referring to is just these pictures on floatplane? There was no
That's it.
spray paint anywhere else?
All three were there, and only 2 of them got a citation like that, and that's because they separate them and they asked them to rat on each other or to do, and then they determined to to do it. But I can tell you, I'm not in a conspiracy theory, but it's because the same officer was involved, and I didn't let him, I let him know I was going to defend my son playing basketball, and if he's going to threaten me with a citation or an arrest, bring it on. And he didn't like it.
All I have,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? Council, Vice Mayor Pazon?
Thanks, Mayor. So Tim, besides bringing this to our attention, you understand the powers of the city council and how we interact with the city manager and the police chief. What is it that you're asking us to do? Because these personnel don't work for us. This is a legal situation. What is it that you're asking for us to do?
I'm saying, if I'm not letting this go, I'm going to come back every month with a new story, and other people communicate, because I've had other people tell their story. But we don't have an avenue you wait till it gets into a lawsuit before the citizens have a right to say, could you look at this? Could you review it? I've been lucky. I've been able, when I was on the city council, I would go to the city manager, but I went to police chiefs in the past. I can tell you all kinds of stories. I had a policeman fall after he pulled somebody over for walking down the road, and it was 20 below, and I watched, and he pulled the guy over, walking, he pulled in. I watched, I was down by the Uptown Motel. The guy got out and walked and left, and I came out and I said, you need a ride? He said, sure. I gave him a ride and I talked to him. I'll tell you that story. But what happened from that? The police officer that had already talked to him followed me and him all the way to where I dropped him off behind the high school at his apartment building. Then I came all the way back into Kenai to my home, and he followed me there.
So,
Nothing happens.
Tim, I guess I don't know if you
It's all right.
specifically answered the question.
Well, no,
I
the
mean,
citizen, what I'm saying is, if you get enough reports or you look at the issues that are out there, one thing the council can do is create a citizens review board for actions of the police or even administrations or somebody. They have them in other cities. That's what might need to happen. But immediately, I'd like you to look in or ask the city manager to look at policies on juveniles. Because I can tell you, I can't believe they send you to juvenile thing for the things that my son's been involved in.
What?
They're very minor in their learning experiences, and like Ding Dong Ditch doesn't work anymore because there's the doorbell cameras.
Right.
But everybody knows about that. But
what I would say is that, I mean, you've given everybody, this is new information, I think, for probably some folks up here, and give us information and probably go to administration and ask, what they're getting for responses. I mean, we're.
well,
very
I'll
one-sided,
come
so-
back and ask for a 10-minute period, and I'll bring some suggestions and some ideas that happened in other cities. But at the same time, I definitely think if our police are not engaging the youth in our community this way, and they'd rather find them, and like I said, I'll give a permission for them to say, here's all the things he did. Because I've been there on every one when they've brought them, and that, I'm telling you, the tardy and that, I can tell you, like I told you, where the police pull up to him when he's walking from the teen center. I'm on the phone with them. They pull up, say, what are you doing? And that, say, I'm waiting for my dad. He's coming right now. There he is. And this was a gal officer, and she looked and said, oh, Tim Navarre's your dad? Yep, okay. And off she drives. I come right up behind him and say, what's that all about? He said, nothing, they just pulled up and did. This was 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I've had the police, I cooperate with the police. Somebody runs from them because they've got a probation violation, and I help out a lot of people, but clear on Forest Drive. The state troopers and the city police show up my door at midnight, knock on the door. I said, come on in. If he's here, grab him.
Hey, Tim,
I don't harbor them. I work with that.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna wrap this up here.
All right.
But let's, like I said, if you want to come back with a
I will.
furtherance of what you had a recommendations or suggestion, the direction the city goes in regards to policy with juvenile. I don't even know what that is, if it's a standard, police standard, but it's certainly something I can get information on, so I appreciate that.
No problem.
So,
And just in closing, I just want to say, because I really do, the police are needed in our community, but they don't get better if you don't get to ask them questions. And I've asked a lot of questions through the years. And I've also been a help to them in a number of cases. And also on Christmas Eve in 2003 is when John Watson died. And I'm the one that raised the $7,500 to put on the memorial clock. Nobody else did. I care about the police, and that burns in my brain to this day. I bet there's officers over at that don't even know that date, but I'll never forget that date. But that was a sad day in our community, and I support the police, and that my actions today is not to diminish the police. It's to make them better and to do it. Just because I'm personally involved, but I've had a lot of people that have come to me and said, here's this happened. And there's no avenue to raise an issue. And I personally just can't take it anymore.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Appreciate it coming in.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the general public who'd like to speak to council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Oh, Samantha's got her hand. Oh, Ms. Nelson, go ahead, Marion. Yep, just give your name and whether you're present. Yep, it is.
Come on now. Well, you know what I'm here for, to tell you a little bit about the Arts Center this week, which is culminating at the end of the month in our annual Harvest Auction fundraiser. And of course, we're always needing money, and this is specifically, the Harvest Auction is the money is a nuts and bolts situation. It's what keeps the doors open and utilities paid and all that sort of stuff. It's 50 people in the room. We have it catered with Hearth Eatery, Chef Virginia over there. She does a great job. And for those of you who still take the paper, the great spread in here with some of the pictures of some of the artwork that's on the walls right now. And these are part of the silent auction, just part of them, silent auction offering. This is a part of Thor Evenson's painting of Snug Harbor, of course. This is a print of that painting, which is quite large. This is a fairly large print, too. But many other things, and also a stay at the Evenson Lodge in North Kenai, as well as a stay at their new hotel, the Inn, really a small hotel, in Highliner Inn in Anchorage. So, some new things as far as that goes, too. Lots of great art. You can bid right now on the silent auction items. There's the artwork hanging on the wall, and then right next to it is a bid sheet where you can bid all throughout the month. And you can own that piece now by paying full value, but you can't take it home till the end of the month. So if you're interested in going, and I hope you are, $50 a ticket, and again, only 50 people in the room. Our auctioneer will be Ryan Kapp, who does a great job, and he better be there. He always threatens, well, if something else comes along, Marion, oh, don't do that to me, please. Also, many other things like season pass at the golf course, season pass at the Oilers, and yes, from the Brown Bears too, but they haven't given me the actual paper. So other things yet to come. Any questions from anybody?
Thank you, Marion. That's
Yep.
always a great event. Councilman Ware?
It's a lot of fun. It's a
I
lot.
just wanted to say thank you for the invitations that you left
Oh, yeah.
us.
Well, we're happy to have our City of Kenai people there.
Thank you, Marion. I see we have Samantha Springer online. Ms. Springer?
Hey guys, sorry I couldn't make it there in person tonight. So just wanted to go over a few things. We have the Kenai Silver Salmon Derby, obviously starting next week from the 12th to the 17th, so that starts on Tuesday. Tickets will be available at Three Bears, at Sportsman's, at the Kenai Chamber, and also the Soldotna Chamber has agreed to sell tickets as well to help us. And then we will be having the weigh-in still be at Three Bears, and then we did talk to State Parks, and we are going to be having a weigh-in on the weekend at Eagle Rock Boat Launch that the chamber will be responsible for. It's going to be the three of us kind of taking turns weighing fish out there. Then we'll have the Kenai Silver Salmon Derby Awards at 11:45 a.m. on September 20th at the Kenai Chamber. And following that at 12 p.m. will be the 2023 City Council Debate Forum that Meryl Sturkowski will be moderating. So, and then, of course, Kenai River Marathon, September 24th with the spaghetti feed on the 23rd. And then we move right into October, so pretty busy month this month.
Thank you, Samantha. Any questions for Ms. Springer? And I think I'm scheduled to do the first spin, right? Is that correct? The first
I think you're scheduled to do the first and the final.
and final, correct. Yep. Pressure's on. That's always fun. But I know last year when we did the final, a bunch of people were there who had caught their fish, and the winners were there. So it was kind of neat that they were in attendance. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, Samantha. Appreciate you letting us know what's going on there.
Of course.
Is there anybody else from the general public who'd like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Mr. Tungseth, just give your name and whether you're a resident of Kenai, please.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Ryan Tunseth. I live at 2815 Bryson Avenue in Kenai. Perhaps a question, I suppose, for the attorney or the clerk. I had been here to speak on the Boys and Girls Club matter that was postponed. I think that was part of the consent agenda. I might be wrong, but I'm here if you guys are wanting to talk about that. And then also, I'm interested in number 8, the discussion about marijuana walk-up and drive-up regulations. And so available if you guys have questions about that. I'm pretty involved with the control board and the industry as well. And so just kind of want to extend the offer if you guys have any questions or want me to speak later. I'm not really sure procedurally if I'm supposed to talk about any of this or
Well,
not.
yeah, I mean, I believe it's a discussion item that was requested by by our city attorney. So I guess when we get to that, we'll open it up to kind of see where the discussion goes. It might not hurt to weigh in or hear someone from the business side of it, their expectations, but I'll see where the conversation goes. As far as the Boys and Girls Club vacation, there was amendment memo to postpone that to our next meeting, which I presume will pass, but yeah, you might want to stick around for that. But I think that was the whole idea, was to postpone it to get basically non-objection from all parties to end up where you guys are going to. And I think we're pretty, according to the planner, pretty close to that right now.
Yeah, definitely. She's done a fantastic job. Great planner. Anyways, okay, thank you. That's all.
Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to speak to the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Very good. Moving forward, that moves us to item E1, public hearings. Ordinance number 3363-2023, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport, special revenue and airport operations facility capital funds to provide supplemental funding for the Kenai Municipal Airport Operations Facility Boiler and HVAC Controls Replacement Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I moved an act ordinance 3368, 2023.
A second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3363-2023? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council. Councilmember Doppett.
I just want to say this is a great project. I know I went to the old timers luncheon over there at the senior center, and everybody mentioned the new boiler and their excitement about getting the new backup generator, and I think it's a great opportunity for them to get some much needed increased in new amenities, and being able to have that backup generator, especially with this last windstorm and stuff, is going to be big. Is the wrong one?
Yeah,
Wrong
this
one.
is, yeah, this is for the HVAC over at the airport. Yeah,
Boiler, I
over
heard
at the operations facility. Yeah, other boiler. Councilmember Naxton.
I agree, it is confusing. Two boilers on the same, and then the other one has a, but
Yeah, this
it's
is
it's all good stuff. And
Yeah,
I
it's a-
definitely support this, but I did have a question. I noticed that, it's on the airport, and it was funded, the building was funded by the FAA for the most part, and So the question really is there doesn't appear to be any FAA funds that would be available for this. It's just coming out of the airport fund. Is that correct?
Acting Manager Ross?
Councilman Axel, I think I'll defer to Mary if she's aware of the answer. If not, to Scott, because I'm not exactly.
Oh, there you go. Or Mr. Curtin, yes.
Through the
Go
mayor. Acting City Manager Ross, thank you for the question. Airport Manager Bondurant we have had communications with the FAA. We don't have a grant that has been identified as yet, but we have gotten positive information back from them that the majority of this would be eligible for FAA compensation. Originally, when it started, they have some limitations on maintenance type projects, but because of the age of the boilers and the apparatus that we have stored at that facility, it does appear that the majority of this is going to get covered under a future FAA grant. So, and I might have some of that in the memo saying that at a later date, council may expect to see some additional legislation to that regard. Thank you.
Further questions or deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxted,
Yes.
Councilmember Dothit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baisden,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Sonar.
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance 3368, 2023 is enacted.
Thank you. That brings us to item E2, ordinance number 3369-2023. I would just like to point out, normally we don't do this. We would do introduction meeting prior to enactment, or when we move it onto the floor for consideration. But some of these happen every once in a while to be time sensitive, and we'll explain that when we get to that. But so as we get through to move this, just want to give everybody a heads up on that. So first of all, we have ordinance number 3369-2023, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund to procure consumables for aircraft rescue and fire training operations at the Alaska Fire Training Facility. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to introduce ordinance 3369, 2023 and request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion? Unanimous consent was requested. Oh, Vice Mayor Baisden.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe a question if we can go through the city manager of the airport.
We'll get to that. We're
Oh,
just,
okay,
this is
sorry.
motion for introduction.
Yep, sorry.
So is there any objection to motion for introduction? Seeing none, I'll need to have a motion for second reading, please. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move for a motion of second reading of ordinance 3369, 2023 and request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that is approved. So now we have ordinance number 3369-2023 for second reading, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund to procure consumables for aircraft rescue and fire training operations at the Alaska Fire Training Facility. I'll have a motion for enactment, please. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to enact ordinance 3369, 2023.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3369-2023?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, seeing nobody online, we'll bring it back to council now. Vice Mayor Baisden.
Thank you, Mayor. So maybe a question for the acting city manager through the acting airport manager. Any more acting going on? And I know Mary's been gone for a while, but she has a good history with this. I know we've made some changes over there dealing with the facility management and that type of stuff. In this aspect, when we pay for the fuel, does the cost get reimbursed by the time when we do the training? Does that come back that it's covered at that point? Thank you.
Acting City Manager Ross. I'll defer.
So I had that same question, and she answered yes to me, but I'll let Mary give you more detail if she has it.
Acting Manager Bondurant.
For the consumables and the student or who's ever, like in this case, Statewide Aviation and Anchorage International, pay for the consumables consumables directly back to the city.
Thank you.
I understand that this is for propane for the apparatuses, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep, very good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dothit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bayston,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted.
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance number 3369, 2023 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have resolution number 2023-53, authorizing a budget transfer in the Vintage Point Congregate Housing Improvement Capital Fund and authorizing a construction agreement and corresponding purchase order for the Vintage Point Boiler and Controls Replacement Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-53.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2023-53? I don't see anybody in chambers or online, so bring it back to council, and I think we could, Councilmember Dothit, if you
I'll just
wanted to
reiterate the same thing.
reference your previous comments, I guess.
I'll previous reference those.
Okay, very good.
Do we get like a discount if we buy enough boilers in the city? I'm just wondering. 3 for 1 or something?
Yeah, this is definitely a boilerplate agenda tonight, for sure. Vice Mayor Basin.
I'd ask for unanimous consent.
Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2023-53 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2023-54, authorizing a professional services agreement and corresponding purchase order for the Lilac Lane Roadway Improvements Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-54 and request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2023-54? I don't see anybody in chamber or online. With that, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council.
I just want to
Councilmember Dothit.
let it be known, I do own a piece of property, a duplex rental property on Lilac, so I don't know if you want me to recuse myself or not, but just want to put it out there.
Yeah. I would rule that you, since you do not have a financial interest in the award of this, that you wouldn't have to recuse yourself. Thank you for disclosing.
Yep.
Further discussion?
I do have one question on this. I was looking at the bids, and it probably would be for staff, but the differences in the bids seemed quite alarming. Is there, I guess I'd be curious, is it just because it's the only local company, or what was the biggest difference? Why was there such a huge difference in bid prices?
Acting City Manager Ross.
Through the mayor, Councilor Dothit, I'm again going to defer to the Public Works Director.
Mr. Curtin.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Dothit, thank you. Yes, it's basically Nelson Engineering is local here. They're routinely doing work for us. These other two contractors are outside of the peninsula. Their staff would be paying per diem and hotel lodging and everything for most of their entire teams for supporting the project.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Was unanimous consent requested? Okay, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2023-54 is adopted. That brings us to resolution number 2023-55, denying and requesting exemptions to Kenai Municipal Code 14.10.070 subdivision design standards and granting exceptions to Kenai Municipal Code Section 14.10.080 minimum improvements required for Strawberry Hill Estates 2023 edition preliminary plat. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-55.
I'll second it.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2023-55? Mr. Bunce? Mr. Bunce, you have the floor. Hello? Dave Bunce, can you hear me? Did he raise his hand?
He did. Mr. Bunce, if you are muted, *6 will unmute you.
Okay, how about now?
Yep.
We can hear you
Can
now.
hear
Hear me now?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Yes, my name is David Bunce, and this is property that we own. Been building houses on the peninsula for about 39 years, and now venturing into developing some property. And in talking with our surveyor, it was recommended that we maybe ask for this variance to not dedicate DeVray through, since it came out very close to the intersection. Since then, I've had great conversations and been very helped by Linda Mitchell, and she is a great asset to the city and has been very helpful in educating me. And sorry to waste the council's time, but we are in agreement with that right away going through. However, I would like to, I don't know the process or how the council would feel about not dedicating the south side of DeVray, the south side of what would be Wortham, so that we don't dump traffic out so close to the intersection. Ms. Mitchell has checked with the Alaska DOT, and they have not expressed any problem with that. However, the advice of our surveyor is that the Alaska DOT would not like to have traffic so close to the intersection of Strawberry with Burr Highway, and by not doing the south side, they would push the traffic further back on Strawberry Road. And I'm not sure what the process to amend the plot plan. We don't really want to stall this any longer, so maybe it's a vacate the right-of-way later if that's the right process.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Bunce from council? Go ahead. Oh, Councilmember Nexon.
Not of Mr. Bunce.
Huh?
Not of Mr.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bunce. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to resolution number 2023-55? Anybody else online? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. I understand Ms. Mitchell has a little presentation on this. Is that correct? So we might get a little bit more. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Let's make sure my clicker works. Tends to, yep. Okay, thank you. I thought it would be important for this particular project to give council a background to better understand what is being requested. Therefore, as noted in the resolution, exceptions to our subdivision standards require council's approval. This is why it's presented before you. Preliminary plats are just recommendation from planning and zoning, which then gets forwarded to the borough. With that being said, next slide. An overview of the preliminary plat. In red is the outline of the subdivision. This is a 13-lot subdivision, and the applicant submitted 2 requested exceptions, which one is typically adjoining streets through the subdivision. As you can see, DeVray runs to the north and to the south, so code requires that that gets connected through this preliminary plat. In addition, the exception wants to exceed the block face, so I'm going to stand up just to point to you what a block length is. Typically, a block length requires, if this road has Wortham, exceeds 1,400 square feet, that exceeds our standard, which is the case. It's approximately 1,700 linear feet. So borough standard is 1,320. So ours is not as restrictive. With that being said, if we don't require the dedication of DeVray through the subdivision, they exceed the block length. So one cannot be approved without the other. And again, this is currently vacant lot. They're proposing residential. It's in the rural residential zone. Most of these lots are going to be a little bit over an acre lot. And then your surrounding uses are vacant single-family residence. Next slide. So this is the Kenai Code when it comes to requesting variations and exceptions, stating that your council may be allowed to grant these exceptions to our subdivision codes. But what it's important to note, what the reasons should be to approve these is whenever the tract or parcel or lot is subdivided of such unusual size or shape or surrounded by such development of unusual conditions, where applying these standards is a result of hard difficulties. So I want to kind of put emphasis on that, because when you approve exceptions, future requests of similarities, you need to justify that, and that would be helpful for staff. And important as well is ensuring the public welfare and interests of the city and surrounding uses are protected and the general intent of the subdivision regulations are preserved. So this is the provision why this is presented before you, that this resolution is to either deny or approve the requested exceptions. Next slide. So this is the plat before you. This is what it looks like as the applicant's proposal that Wortham runs all the way through. It does not show DevRay being dedicated, which staff is asking that it be dedicated, or sorry, Planning and Zoning Commission is recommending that DevRay be dedicated. If you jump 2 slides over, I highlight it in red to show what P&Z Commission is recommending, that the red portion will be dedicated through. So it would be DevRay running through all the way. But what P&Z is recommending is that they don't have to improve it. Unlike Wortham, typically when it's subdivisions of 10 lots or greater, the subdivider must make the improvements. So P&Z is allowing them, requiring them to still dedicate, but not require them to improve it. I think that was a middle ground for them. And then if you can go 1 slide back, sorry for that disorder. So this is outlining the 2 exceptions of the code that the applicant is requesting. First, relationship to adjoining street system. Our code summarizes it pretty much. DevRay is to the south, a portion is dedicated, and DevRay is dedicated to the north. Ideally, when a subdivider comes in, we want to connect those streets to continue as that street. Otherwise, you have a portion of DevRay that's never going to be built out. So our code requires, this provision right here requires that continuation of DevRay being dedicated through. And as mentioned, secondarily, block lengths. Without that dedication, they will exceed the 1,400 linear feet block length. So next, skip 2 slides. And then while the applicant didn't ask for these exceptions, I think it's important to include it, is our code requires subdivisions 10 or more lots to be connected to public water supply as well as sanitary sewer lines. If you know this part of town, that's very financially unfeasible. And so as administration and staff is recommending that your council approves these exceptions for this development. And next slide. And last one just outlines what P&Z recommendation to your council is to deny not dedicating DevRay through, and then also approving the exceptions to not connect to city water and sewer lines. That's the general recommendation. And happy to answer any question. And David Bunt is a property owner, so if you have any questions for him.
Councilmember Douthat.
So just going back to the owner's testimony, I don't know if can we bring up the slide with showing the DevRay, maybe the one within the red?
Mm-hmm.
Might be easier if we had that slide. So that one there. So the northern portion, which he's talking about wishing to have dedicated like it is, and the southern portion being the one that connects between those 2 lots, and then it would go down to Strawberry. Would it, if only half of that was dedicated, being the northern portion, would that still qualify for the block length regulation? Would that cut that up enough, or does it have to be on both sides of the road? Referring to Wortham.
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Douthat. If the only northern portion was dedicated, it would cut the block length. The only downside to this is typically when we dedicate roads, as you can, and pointing out might be more helpful, is we have to be mindful of our other standards that we would have required of the previous subdividers. So I'm going to point it out to you where the concern is on my end from planning's code. Is when these lots were subdivided, we required them to dedicate half of the street, the 30, and then this one was subdivided, they had to dedicate the other half. And typically, if the city had intended that this was never to be a through street, we would have required a turnaround or a hammerhead. By not dedicating this, we're kind of So yes, well, Mr. Bunn said that, how about we just dedicate this and leave this as is? The question is, we leave a dead end without a turnaround or hammerhead for this subdivision, so that's important to consider.
Would that be an option for him to plat in a turnaround instead?
Potentially, if he can work with the neighbors and the subdivision lots below.
Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I did take a look at the 3W subdivision and some of the other properties. There's some bigger parcels to the north and whatnot, and it is obviously was considered that that would be a through street because of how the platting has been done. But could you talk about the need or in planning for alternate accesses in a subdivision and whatnot? Why this might be important for it, like you're suggesting, to go all the way through as opposed to maybe halfway or not at all?
Thank you, Councilmember Naxton, for that question. It's actually a really good question. We don't know what the development is for these lots to the north. Additional access means if in the future there's more density, more access means emergency access for safety reasons and congestion. I mean, their reasoning as the applicant is saying closing it off to prevent congestion on Strawberry. When I talked to the state DOT, they're okay when it's going onto a collector street, which is Strawberry Road. When I told them, hey, if they provided 3 access onto Strawberry, are you okay with that? Yeah, as long as it's not on the spur, they rather avoid that. The same thought process is with the borough as well. Additional access alleviates congestions and allows for emergency access. You know, if a certain corridor is closed off, we have an alternative route.
Councilmember Winger.
Thank you. Just a little familiar with the Wortham Avenue area. Is that road not connecting all the way through up to Strawberry Road from that? Doesn't connect all the way through? It's a trail. I know it is a trail. So I used to live on, briefly out of high school. I had a house on Strawberry Road. We actually took that trail up to the corner where our house was. So I thought, seeing the development, I haven't driven through past their development, but I was just wondering if that was an option to just continue that trail up to where that 90-degree corner is on Strawberry Road.
Thank you, Council Winger. So if I'm So Wortham Avenue is not dedicated from where it's from the northwest corner. While it's a trail, it's not a road, so we need to dedicate it on the plat to ensure access to the developments of these subdivided lots. So I'm not really sure if I understood your question.
So I guess going back to, so what the concern is also the further development of possibility of that large lot to the north. I'm assuming there's other plotted roads. Are there other plotted roads on that large subdivision that go to the Strawberry Road? To the, I guess, east?
Thank you, Councilman Dothit. I'm happy to answer your question, but so your question real quick. Yes, if you have the map up, there is dedicated road that goes all the way north and then around unsubdivided lots and undeveloped roads. So realistically, this will be the closest, well, dedicated road to Strawberry. Otherwise, you realistically do not have developed roads to go around to Strawberry heading east then south. It's platted, but it's not developed.
Kind of like the other road we're talking about platted but not developed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just saying, so there will be possibility of other plotted roads that will access, other than this being the only other access along with Wortham.
Correct, Councilman Doffett. There would be other access, and that's why Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation is let's dedicate it, but we won't require you to improve it. And there is a condition or stipulation of language to say that if it becomes an improvement district, then all these owners will be part of that if the city decides to come in and improve it.
Councilmember Winger, did you have your question answered completely?
I didn't get to follow up to clarify. Yeah, so if you take Wortham, it follows the trail right up to, when you go down Strawberry Road and you took your first left, so your first 90-degree corner down Strawberry Road, you kind of go up a hill and you reach another 90, and that's where Wortham comes up in a dirt hill, is to that second 90. So that's why I was wondering if we could just extend Wortham, because that does connect through a trail system to the second 90 on Strawberry.
Shelley, can you switch it to the aerial map a couple slides before? I think the aerial will provide some context. Okay. So
the second 90 would actually be where our Chambers zoom camera is. That would be the second 90 up past it. So if you come off the Spur Highway onto Strawberry Road, you take a left. They always call out the first 90.
Okay.
And it kind of goes up a little bit of hill, what we're seeing. And then we get to a second 90 that goes to the right. Wortham Trail punches in right at that second 90, right up off the screen where that road is. So that's why I was wondering if that would, it wouldn't impact other lots from my understanding. So that's why I was wondering if just punching Wortham all the way through to that second 90 on Strawberry was possible.
Well, I guess my question is Wortham platted through those other parcels, or is it just a trail?
thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and thank you, Councilmember Wenger. So as far as I am aware of, Wortham was not platted through those where the trails are. So, but I'm willing to take a deeper dive at it and look into it to see if that's the case or if that's an option.
Thank you, Linda.
Just for clarity, that would be going over other people's property and wouldn't have anything to do with this piece of property, correct?
Correct. We would be going and including other subdivisions as part of this.
Vice Mayor Bazin.
Thank you, Mayor. So sitting through the meeting, I think Planning and Zoning, they had a great discussion. They tried to come up with a reasoning to make this economical for the developer, not having to put water into the development right now, and just by platting this for future needs, so it's there for the city as things expand, sounds pretty reasonable. I think I'm capturing what their discussion was.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think looking at what they, how they've approached this and not actually allowing for dedication but not development at this point, it sort of gives the developer, something that he maybe has to deal with down the road, but not here trying to move this subdivision forward. And I talked to you earlier and you answered a question I had, whether when you do, since the preliminary plan didn't show that dedication, when you actually do dedicate it, to ensure that there was enough room on the lots to accomplish on-site sewer and water, which you indicated there is. Even with that dedication, you can kind of cheat the lot lines out and still get the required amount of acreage per lot, correct?
Thank you, Mayor Guerrero. Correct. So even with this road dedication, I kind of did my preliminary calculations. The applicant or the developer or property owner can still adjust certain lot lines to still maintain a minimum 1 acre lot through the subdivision. It requires some adjustment, but with the dedication, it shouldn't make any of these lots to fall under an acre.
So I, from my perspective, I agree with this as written, and I think allowing it to be, because when you look at this to the north, and I guess my question would be for you, is if this gets developed and water and sewer does get punched out there, there's the likelihood of condensing those lots even more, right? That would require or have more traffic. And I'm not saying that's anything that's going to happen next year, but potentially 30 years from now, maybe, depending. Would that be a correct or a fair statement?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Correct. And this is why these dedications are important to the city, because when we have areas of rural and undeveloped vacant land, we don't know what it looks like when sewer connections and systems are out there, and we will need these dedications. It's harder to get them later versus now where we dedicate it now. And maybe in the future, they can vacate it if there's no intention of the city to develop sewer connections or utility lines. That's an option in the future.
Councilmember Douthat?
And I think the applicant had brought up that they could possibly vacate it after the fact, once the houses are on there and they know they have 1 acre lots and their own well and septic, and it doesn't look like they could approach possibly vacating it, or, at that point, they could maybe possibly look into doing the cul-de-sac turnaround too, so.
Further discussion? Councilmember Nexon?
Just for clarity, the resolution that's in front of us incorporates all of the recommendations of the planning and zoning. So by approving it, we would be, maybe it's good to restate what we're doing. We're going to be allowing DeVray to be platted but not constructed. And I think that there was another had to do with water and sewer, I think. Maybe that was. But by the way, I did have a question on that, 'cause, if I could, and I don't mean to take everybody's time on, because I was surprised that was in there, and I read the code, and it looks like, that we had to make that exception, but the requirement to have water and sewer connected is a distance requirement of 300 feet, 600 feet. Since it's not, I think historically it's always been kind of administratively just, not recommended, not even really discussed, other than it was not in the vicinity. Is it appropriate to have that as an exception that comes back to us to not require it because it can't meet code to be connected to anyway?
Thank you, Councilmember Nexted. You bring up a good point, and the reason why I've included these exceptions, which you haven't seen consistently probably in the last couple of years, is because it's a known fact you can't connect to these systems. Why I put it in the staff report is to bring to your attention that there are certain codes that needs to be revised to ensure that things can be done administratively. At what point do we keep sending these exceptions when it's clearly not possible for a developer to go through this process? So it is my intention to highlight these things to your council to acknowledge that some of our code needs to be changed. But to answer your first question, Councilmember Nexted, is pretty much to summarize this resolution is that you would be denying the requested exceptions to exceed the maximum block length of 1,400 linear feet and waive the rights of dedication of DeVray Street, and then grant the exceptions from connecting to city water and sewer system and road improvement construction of DeVray Street is what this resolution summarizes to.
Very good. Further discussion? Councilmember Raskin?
So it doesn't, we don't dedicate the road then, the plat? We don't plat the road then?
So we will, thank you, Councilmember Askin. We will plat Wortham Avenue and plat DeVray, but not require them to improve DeVray Street. Mm-hmm.
Vice Mayor Basin?
I would ask for unanimous consent.
Oh, very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2023-55 is adopted. I would like to thank Ms. Mitchell for the presentation. I know when I went through this, it was a little bit confusing and you answer every question, but what I really like is when people call in, several right in a row, saying we got a great planner on board. Appreciate that. So let's take a 10-minute at ease.
Well, you're not going to make your 59 minutes.
Well, no, I saw that, yeah. Back on the record, and we are now on item G1, unfinished business, resolution number 2023-49, declaring the rights-of-way of Char Circle as dedicated on Parkview subdivision, plat number KN79-156, and City Park subdivision number 2, plat number KN 2007-149, and a portion of South Spruce Street as dedication on Parkview subdivision, plat number KN 79-156, are no longer needed for a public purpose and consenting to vacation of the rights-of-way. Now, we'll note that they're at our August 2nd, 2023 meeting. This item was postponed to this meeting. And was there a motion to adopt on the floor? Okay, so there's a motion to adopt on the floor. Now, we'll point out that the planner has provided a memo in our laydown tonight asking for a postponement of this. And maybe I could find out what meeting we want to postpone to. The second meeting, our next meeting in September, I believe. September 20th. September 20th, yeah. So there's that memo. So with that, Councilmember Naxton.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make that motion. I was wondering if there's an opportunity for a little more public input, since we have somebody here, and actually the planner here, if there's any additional information, before, just so we know where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, if we, I guess Miss Mitchell, I would probably defer to Miss Mitchell if she wanted to kind of give a report of the status of what we're at. I think we're close. I think at our August 2nd meeting, the reason we postponed was that it seemed between the parties, the Boys and Girls Club and the Evensons, that there was close to a non-objection to move forward from both parties, which for me, I think, and for most of the council is preferable. So could you kind of give us a status report, Ms. Mitchell, of where we're at?
Happy to, Mayor Gabriel, and thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Nexted. So ultimately, your council approved the postponement to allow the applicant to work with the Evenson, the property that would be affected by this vacation. And I believe they met around August 10th, the following week. Unfortunately, I wasn't in town, so I wasn't able to participate in that meeting, but they came to an alternative, and they have submitted a revised preliminary plat, which has made changes to what was submitted before your council in the packet. Therefore, it should go back to P&Z for their recommendations, since there are changes, really an increase to the right-of-way vacation of Spruce Street. So it'll go back to P&Z next week, September 13th, and with their recommendation, we'll bring it back to your council on the 20th.
And you had mentioned to me that there was one part of a city-owned property within that proposed vacation. That was kind of what you were wanting to deal with. Is that correct, Ms. Mitchell?
Correct. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So with the revised preliminary plat, I do have concern from a planning development standard, because the right-of-way vacation would vacate a portion that would then leave Evenson's property to then go from Spruce Street, the improved part, to then a private easement, then back to a public right-of-way remnant portion. And so I'm going to be working with the applicants to address that concern in planning and zoning's packet. And I briefly talked to Ryan here, and he would be amenable to those changes.
Vice Mayor President.
Thank you, Mayor. I know Mr. Tunks's in the audience. Would it be appropriate for him to speak also right now if he had anything to add?
Yes, I guess I could open up for public comment. So if there's anybody that wanted to speak to resolution number 2023-49, would be appropriate. Mr. Tungsten.
I'll be very brief. Ryan Tunseth, 2815 Bryson Avenue. I live in Kenai. We don't have any objections with what the planner's proposing. Our goal here the whole time along is to try to get the maximum amount of property we can for the footprint of the club and the fields, while also having a really positive relationship with the Evensons in the city. And so however we get there, that's sort of our goal. And on the technical side of it, the where this piece of property is, the vacations, those sort of things, I really just sort of yield to your guys' director, because she's fantastic and she's the one that's really caught some of these things. And, you know, I think it's obviously the role of the position, so kudos to her. But we don't have any objections with the way this is moving. It's not stopping us in our development. It's not slowing anything down at this point. And so no reason to rush it. Let's make sure it's done right.
Very good. Questions of Mr. Tungseth? Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you for working with the planner and the applicant. Anybody else that would like to speak to resolution number 2023-49? Nobody else online? Councilman Axon.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to postpone Resolution 2023-49 until our September 20th, 2023 meeting. Request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none, the motion is approved, and we'll move that to our September 20th agenda. That brings us down to item H8, discussion marijuana walk/drive-up regulations. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the clerk and I just basically wanted to make council aware that there was this change to state law that would allow for marijuana retail establishments to have a walk-up drive-through so that people could purchase, I guess, whatever was sold in the establishment without going in, but in a drive-through or walk-up scenario. We don't really have a recommendation. I personally haven't experienced it, anybody doing this in Kenai city limits, although Ryan's here, he may probably knows more than I do about what's actually going on sometimes in this industry. Mostly we just want to make you aware. If you want to take action, you can. Not take action tonight, but if there was discussion individually or as a body that council wanted us to, the options are do nothing, it's allowed, although anybody who is doing it would have to come back and have their conditional use permit amended to allow it, because the conditional use permits are very narrow in the scope of what they allow. So if you did nothing and somebody wanted to do it, they would have to come back to P&Z and have their conditional use permit amended. If you wanted to prohibit it, that's something council could do. If you wanted to regulate it differently than what the state does, that's also something you could do in the future. It did go to planning and zoning, and they had requested that council enact a moratorium to give them more time to look into it. But that's sort of the background, and we don't, as administration, we're not bringing you a recommendation, just making sure you know what's going on and what changes there could be.
Just out of curiosity, do they allow drive-ups for liquor stores? I guess yeah. Well, no, I was just thinking that it just seems like there's a, marijuana control board and the alcohol control board, that there would be some sort of parallel regulation. So, but at any rate, Vice Mayor Basin.
So if I understand, thank you, Mayor, if I understand through legal, the state is making the change, so if we're silent, it will be legal here in the city if we do nothing, correct?
Mr. Plum.
Correct, although they would still have to come back to planning and zoning and have their, if it's an existing establishment, they would have to have their conditional use permits amended to allow it, and it would have to fit in with the criteria under a conditional use permit. But yes, it could be done.
Thank you. So I guess I'll just go on the record. If nobody else does, I'll sponsor something to oppose it.
I guess just for clarification, Planning and Zoning's recommendation is that we enact a moratorium. Did they say for how long that they would expect to work through that?
No, but
so if you suggested a moratorium, would that be like a 1 year?
could be, I think, reasonably would be 6 months to 1 year.
I guess.
Councilmember Donathan?
We have I would say, expert in this matter. Maybe he can give us a more description of what exactly the regulations are in the statewide and how it works through the state regulation. I'd be kind of curious to hear from.
I wouldn't have any objections to Mr. Tungseth.
Just kind of curious what the
if you
state's
wanna-
allowing and how it's regulated or how they legalized it and how it
I
works.
think there are probably people that would have questions, but I just want everybody to understand that you speak for yourself, correct? And you don't speak for other marijuana businesses.
Well, both. I'm going to take my Boys and Girls Club coat off and put on my marijuana shirt. What up, council? Both. I own a business in Kenai. I'm also the president of the Marijuana Industry Association. The position that the Industry Association took and the position that I shared with council was that in general, we were for it. It's sort of free market. That was the state law. The state had passed it, that if people wanted to do that, they should be able to do that. This certainly started with COVID. That was where the extension of the curbside pickup and that sort of stuff happened. And so like in a lot of marijuana regulation where there's just a little bit of creep, we try to kick the door in and take as much as we can get. They passed the drive-through regulation, and what I said to planning and zoning was, personally, I'm not going to be able to do it at my business. So I don't intend to do it, and I'm not sure that there's anybody else that's intending to do it right now. For a lot of reasons, I think it's kind of difficult the way they wrote the regulation to do it, but also just don't really have the space to do it. Now that said, I didn't think it was something that they should outright prohibit, because there are people that certainly benefit from this. I've got videos on my phone I could show you of elderly people that come in my store that have wiped out, fell, ambulances showing up for people that have slipped on the ice, all sorts of things that happen in any retail business where you might make the case for having a drive-through. Certainly in areas where it's really cold and remote, Fairbanks, stuff like that, they had a lot stronger arguments for the cold reason of why they wanted this. But it's difficult the way it's written. And so the way it's written is, you still have to conform to all of the requirements that are existing within any other marijuana business. So all of the camera coverage, all of those sort of things, the alarm systems, exterior walls. But also you have to ID everybody that's in the car. And you're not allowed to have anybody in the car with you unless they're under 7 years of age and your natural child or ward. And so I also sort of thought, man, this is going to be difficult without like a bank teller style window and being sort of very intrusive. I had concerns about whether or not that sort of breaking through the veil of the window was even something that the business could legally do. And so it was just something that I've sort of decided, it wasn't something that I was going to do. But I felt strong enough about, the reasons where it might be beneficial that I thought, don't just outright prohibit it. But that's the will of this board is to do whatever it is you feel like is the right thing for the city of Kenai. The will of the Marijuana Control Board is represented by industry, by rural Alaska, by public safety. And so it's a little bit different makeup of a group. You guys represent the citizens, and so it's what you want your community to look like. The other reason that I thought perhaps there was some that the Planning and Zoning Commission might not have had enough information about the specific rule itself, and perhaps maybe they should just wait, was because the Marijuana Control Board had not actually finished. So part of their request to Planning and Zoning and to the city to take action on this is to make things easier for them. So they know right off the bat when an applicant comes in and is putting something in, if it's in an area where there's an objection, then they just tell them, hey, you can't do that. But they had not even completed having the actual approved forms for drive-through. For the application forms, it's called an MJ02, an MJ03, and an MJ31 or 21, I believe. They hadn't even approved those yet. The Marijuana Control Board was meeting that same day that Planning and Zoning was, and it was, a issue that was talked about at length. And so, I was sort of also making the point, I think, that while I think the state is asking you to make a decision on this, to make you know, their life a little easier about how Kenai feels about this, whether or not it's not allowed, it didn't actually appear that maybe they kind of had the full scope of what the law actually was and what it did. And so, and I don't know that we did either as industry, because a lot of these forms and stuff were still being debated on the dais of the Marijuana Control Board. And so I think that hopefully gives you sort of a better picture about the landscape that we're in. Officially, the industry association was supportive of it. Personally, you know, I was kind of on the fence because I couldn't do it, but I see some of the benefits of it as well. I also think, if I could just add one more thing, you know, there are a lot of questions, and you're hearing more PSAs about impaired driving, and specifically related to marijuana. And so, you know, there were a lot of questions raised at the time by Chief Holscher with the marijuana office, you know, specifically about that. And I don't really know what the answer to that is. I think that other states that have done this, I don't know that they've seen some tremendous increase, but I don't really have the answer to that. But it was a concern certainly shared by him, and I think it's a concern that still exists.
Vice Mayor Basin.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate your comments. I guess my biggest issue is that, of course, industry, they're going to want to do anything they can to make a profit and make that easier. I don't have a problem with that either. My issue is with the state. If the state marijuana board wanted to pass something, they could have passed it to where we would have to take action for it to take place instead of the other way. So basically, my signal is going to be this body needs to take action, and I'm going to say no as a member of this board, but the state could have done the opposite. Instead of making it to where it's legal unless we do something, they could have said it's illegal unless we do something, and they didn't. And that's going to be my comment back to them. Because we're a home rule city, and we get to deal with the population here, with their local constituents, and basically what they've done is they've put us in a position to have to make the yes or no, because they didn't want to do that.
Councilmember Naxton.
I agree, but I do have a question. But you know, the state put us in that position after the voters approved it too. So we created our own regulations and whatnot, so we had to make those decisions. But not disagreeing with you, just that's the position we've been in. Is there any other avenue for, I forget how the regulations do work, if somebody cannot physically come into the store for some reason? They physically can't, can they call? Is there already some kind of provisions, or do you have to actually cross the threshold to purchase marijuana, let's say at your store? Is there already something there that's available?
So the curbside is already available, but they still, you know, you could have like a curbside window or something like that. They would still have to walk up to that window. That sort of started with COVID. But really, no. The answer to your question is no, that there's not. You need to be physically present in the store. You need to be able to show your ID in the store. And so, no, there's not really any other option that exists. You can look at menus online. You can make orders online. But, you know, having that order extend to delivering to your house or us bringing it out to your car or something like that is not something that currently is allowed.
Councilmember Dothan. Oh, sorry. Did you have a follow-up?
Just, you know, I do kind of tend to agree with Councilmember Baisden on this, but the other thing that gives me a little pause is something you said, that the regulations haven't been completely promulgated. We don't know what they are that we're saying no to. And so...
if I could just clarify, the regulations...
Is it going to change anybody's mind?
Thank you, Member Naxted. Councilmember Naxted. The regulations have been promulgated, and they've been signed by the Lieutenant Governor. The piece that has not been completed is sort of the administrative action of creating the framework for how you license somebody that was the part that was missing. But the actual regulations are signed.
Councilmember Dothan.
So, and I kind of oblivious. So, with medical marijuana, though, in theory, somebody could get medical prescriptions like a Walgreens type situation. Is that how that would? So they could still go through like a Walgreens to get medical marijuana prescribed? Is that how that would work still, or no? Is that different?
No. Once the state had legalized recreational marijuana, essentially our medical marijuana program ceased to exist.
I was curious. You don't happen to know when they did medical marijuana, did they allow that to go through drive-throughs? I don't know.
No, I don't think so, because there wasn't really any establishments for that at the point, and pharmaceuticals were still sort of barred from dealing with it because it was still considered a class 1 controlled substance, so there wasn't actually any. I could be wrong, but I think it was mostly agreements that people made with under the provisions of the Raven Law that essentially allowed people to be growing in their home and giving one Alaskan.
I wasn't sure if I just was.
But I don't know. I don't know the complete
I didn't
answer
know
to
either.
it.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if you know or not.
Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I actually have a question for administration. Is this an appropriate time, or?
Actually, I think probably if we just get through with Mr., anybody's got anything for Mr. Tungseth, and then we can kind of round table that up here, because I've got some other, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Ryan, so I'm kind of getting a hint from a couple of the council members up here that they want to make sure that, well, if you're sick, maybe you can go through a drive-through and get it. Your business has to meet accessibility just like any other business through the building code. So basically, your business is already accessible from anybody that meets the requirements that our codes are. So we don't have a problem with accessibility in your establishment, correct?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
So I mean, that's what I'm kind of trying to wrap my brain around is that parallel between, liquor stores and package stores and marijuana. I mean, why there's no, it's not parallel, I guess. Anyway, and it seems odd to me that if you're going to do that for marijuana, that the liquor stores would say, hey, we want our own drive-through too. I know other states allow it, but other than Edie's package store years ago, that's the last one I remember here. Councilman Raskin.
Is there maybe some comparison with this to the pharmacy, like Soldotna Pharmacy has a drive-through? Is that maybe part of this?
I'm not sure if I understand the question completely, but I don't think so. The issue that cannabis faces right now is its schedule, right? It's schedule under the Controlled Substance Act. And so it's currently scheduled as a class 1 controlled substance, which the nexus for that is supposed to be something that's highly addictive, something that you can overdose and die from, and something that has zero medicinal benefits. So where this scheduling issue is sort of rubbing up against people is, first of all, fentanyl is a Schedule 2 substance. Nobody has OD'd off of marijuana. And there are approved drugs, Epilodex and Sativex, that were based off of cannabis. So its schedule doesn't apply. But because it's a Schedule 1, if you're talking about the model and the way that the store might have to look or that type of thing, could be very similar to something like that. But in terms of it being some sort of pharmaceutical allowance, it's really not at this point because it's still very much hindered by the CSA. I would also just point out that as something you may see, and I think that I'm already seeing it. I think I saw one pop up already, and I've cautioned about this before. When the 2018 Farm Bill was approved, there was a loophole in that Farm Bill that basically said anything 0.03% or less is hemp. And what operators have been figuring out how to do is synthesize a synthetic version of Delta-9 THC from CBD, so therefore it's derived from hemp, and then they'll mix this into something like a gummy that's very heavy, some type of edible, and it will still be able to pass a dry weight basis test of 0.03% or less, but it will be laced with THC, loaded, 1,000 milligrams or more. So while we talk about all of the regulations and things that are in place for the regulated community, there's this undercurrent that's happening right now in every state and federally that really sort of could stand to sort of unravel anything that you do. I would challenge that if it fell within the conditional use permits and stuff like that, somebody could probably open up a drive-through in Kenai right now and be selling intoxicants to minors and probably be legal doing it. That's how problematic this loophole is. So it's just something to be aware of as well.
Councilor Weiner.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, with the Delta 9, we wouldn't be able to regulate against that. Is that correct? Because it's a different market. We wouldn't be able to say that that couldn't happen in our city. Is that correct?
I think you could, but it would be difficult because of what was legalized within the Farm Bill. The state has tried. The state's actually rewriting some of their regulations right now and issued cease and desist orders to people, and it all sort of spells to some sort of lawsuit that I think is probably brewing. I think that you probably do have some tools that you could at least certainly exert some pressure, but it definitely looks like a legal battle that's sort of shaping up.
And what was the Farm Bill again that you referenced?
I think it's the 2018 Farm Bill, which was part of the originally, I believe, part of the Agriculture Improvement Act. But if you just looked up, Farm Bill, Delta 9, synthetic THC, you'll see it's really quite incredible. You'll see all sorts of stuff about it, and I could be more than happy to share a lot more as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
And I would just like to reiterate that I was not trying to encourage that I was necessarily for this. I am definitely leaning on the side of sponsoring or co-sponsoring some kind of an amendment to our, would not make drive-through marijuana. I think it's right up there with similar reasons for not having drive-through liquor stores. We don't want to encourage it any more than we have to for possibility of DUIs and those kind of things. And I don't really know. I think now, early in this process, would be a good time for us to set something on paper that says, we don't want to see this. We've got lots of other avenues for people to access marijuana in the community. I think a drive-through, don't really think seems the right message to the community that it's okay to go up and buy your marijuana as you're driving out downtown and cruising around and don't even have to get out of your vehicle anymore. I think there's ways that people can get in and out with assistance or whatever. And so I definitely am for some kind of regulation to not allow this.
Well, I think Vice Mayor Basin is indicated that he was, from what I understand, wanting to sponsor legislation, working with the administration to move something forward for the body to consider, which I think that's sort of the default now, that that we actually get it in the form of a ordinance, and that's something that we can deliberate on and move forward one way or the other, and instead of a moratorium or anything else or kicking the can down the road. I got Councilmember Naxted first.
Oh, thank you. Just a question on such an ordinance. Does that, it needs to go to planning and zoning, correct, for their review? Because, and we're getting a nod there. And what are the avenues of sending it? Is it, we could kind of agree on something to, can it go directly to them, or does it have to come to us first?
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. So it would come to council first and then be referred to Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't think time is necessarily of the essence. Before anybody was going to legally operate a drive up in the city, they would have to come back and get their conditional use permit amended first. And I think, I don't think we've had any applicants yet. And like Mr. Tunseth said, I think the state's still finalizing or has just recently finalized the details. You need space, you need a building permit. So I think there's time to have it introduced, then referred to the commission, and then it would be finally voted on by the council. It does go to planning and zoning because our marijuana regulations are in Title 14, but really this body is sort of the policy makers of the city. When planning and zoning gets it, their focus should be narrow as to you know, how it fits into the planning and zoning code. I don't think, they're not the body that makes decisions on what's good for the city or not in general, like this body certainly has the authority to say, you know, yes, marijuana, we're gonna regulate it, or no marijuana in general. That's more this body's purview than really planning and zoning to make sort of decisions that aren't technical within the planning and zoning code or applying how it would fit with planning and zoning, whereas this body can certainly look at things far outside of, you know, the planning and zoning code.
Councilmember Dothan?
Back to the whole moratorium, is that, like, would we be able to set a moratorium tonight, in tonight's meeting, or is that still something that's gonna have to go through different meetings? Because I'm just curious on how.
Yeah, no, that would take an ordinance as well. Pretty sure it'd be an ordinance.
That's what I was curious, so it's gonna be about
But
the same
again,
amount of
I
time.
really don't think this is like, if we don't get this done tonight, the city's gonna start getting applications tomorrow.
I was just looking for clarification that basically a moratorium is gonna take about the same amount of time as if we were to move something forward to change regulation.
If council's desire as a policymaking body is, hey, we don't want this in the city, then there's absolutely no reason for a moratorium, and you're not really taking anything away from planning and zoning. I mean, in some ways you could be helping them because they don't need to waste their time researching this because you've decided as a council that it's not something you want anyway.
Councilmember Winger?
Thank you. So I guess I wanted to know really how this came forward to P&Z for their original discussion when things weren't really finalized with the board. I heard that a few of them felt that they were kind of caught off guard with this, and when they contacted me, I hadn't even heard about this, so.
So, thank you, sorry.
Mr. Rowland?
Councilmember Winger, so again, this was just actually, our clerk was sent a copy of the regulations, their new state regulations, so we just brought them to planning and zoning and council for you guys to be aware of it, and if you want to do something about it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. Again, we're not making a recommendation or you know, if this is something you're really interested in, we can give you copies of, you know, the details. But at this point, we just wanted to make both the council and planning and zoning aware of it so that they can discuss it and give us direction if they want any further action.
Thank you. And then just another comment. Just because Mr. Tunseth had spoke about the Farm Bill 2018 with Delta 9, you know, really that brings up a whole nother concern for me is the synthetic drugs. I think previous, we had a lot of synthetic drugs that were sold through Sterling tobacco shops, and I know that was constantly changing. But I definitely have a concern with that as well. I don't know how we can navigate through to encompass that because, you know, we've got the legal marijuana sales, but the last thing we want are these synthetic drugs coming into the city as well. I think Chief Ross maybe has seen the experience with that back in the around the 2010s, maybe a little earlier when that spice and all those other drugs were on. I think bath salts were another one. Those are all synthetic drugs. So I guess when I hear Delta 9, I immediately go to that. So I just wanted to bring that in comment that is definitely as well a concern for me.
Yeah, and I think we're getting a little bit off the topic of drive-through windows and that. I mean, not to say it's not a concern. I think everybody would share that concern, and if that's something that requires further action from our administration or council, certainly wouldn't. But I think that's a separate issue. Mr.
Mayor
Thompson?
Gabriel, if I may, I'd just like to respond to Tia's comment because I think there's a clarification there that needs to be made. So when Spice was developed, it was created, I believe the first iteration of it was called JWH-18. It was just a completely different chemical compound that gave the same effect on cannabinoid receptors in the brain, but didn't show up. What this is Delta 9 THC. It's the exact same thing that's in the marijuana that I sell. It's just being created and synthesized from CBD. And so it's not Spice. It's not any of those things. It's the fact that it's being derived from CBD that allows it to exist in this loophole that takes it out of the sort of regulated market. But I just wanted to make that clear, that it's not the same issue as what was sort of plaguing the area as you referenced.
Thank you.
I guess where I'm at right now is if Councilmember or Vice Mayor Bazin is going to work with the administration to put out an ordinance, along with possibly Councilmember Dothett, then that will kind of drive the direction that this is going to go. I think I agree with Mr. Bloom that there's no sense considering a moratorium and wasting time if we're just going to not allow it. So I think that sort of determines where we're going right now, and I don't think there's really anything else the body needs to do beyond get ready to deliberate when that comes forward. Other than what I would ask is just to have, just for fairness for everybody, is to have maybe ask administration to ask Ms. Mitchell to list the criteria that would be considered under a conditional use permit for a walk-up, drive-up window. So that would be something that's kind of getting all the information, I guess. Okay, I think we can move on. That brings us to Commission Committee Reports, Council on Aging.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. There was no meeting on Council on Aging to report. Their next meeting is Thursday, September 14th at 3 p.m. at the Senior Center.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Ryan, for the information, too. Sorry about that. I appreciate it. Airport Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. No meeting, and our next meeting is next Thursday, the 14th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Harbor Commission.
We have a work session coming up, I think it's the 13th, 11th, on the 11th, but no meeting scheduled, just a work session this time.
Okay, Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you. Parks and Recs meets tomorrow, and I want to thank Councilmember Askin for covering for me tomorrow as well.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. So you have your minutes from the last meeting from Planning and Zoning, and our next meeting is September 13th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Beautification Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Beautification Committee did have a work session for a flower walkthrough. I did not participate in that. I honestly did not get the notification on the work session. Their next regular scheduled meeting will be on September 12th.
Thank you. Under report of the mayor, I do have a few things. So on, first of all, I would like to say I had family in town for the first part of August. I'd like to, and then didn't make the last meeting. I want to thank Vice Mayor Bazin for sitting in and running our last meeting. Apparently, he's way more efficient than I am. And under the special meeting, Councilmember Next, I understood, acted as pro tem. On August 19th, I did attend the Triumvirate Theater groundbreaking ceremony, which was very, very well done. I mean, they had a stage set up. It was done at the little pavilion there by Dobbin-Speck Pond. And then Mayor Machicki, we had several council members there, but Senator Murkowski, Mayor Machicki, and so a really good turnout and a lot of people there, a lot of kids. And then after that, they ended up walking down to the location, and they had all the kids with shovels got to do the ceremonial earth turning. So very, very, very well done. It was a nice day. And then from there, I went over to Industry Appreciation Day, which was like one of the best days of the summer weather-wise, and it was just fantastic and really good turnout and well attended. And I think that's just going to get bigger and better again. On August 22nd, I attended the Kenai Peninsula College open house. Got to meet with Chancellor Parnell over there, along with our city manager, Terry Eubank, and got to talk about some of the needs that we feel the city can support the city of Kenai, mainly, developing that skill craft and trades in the community, but also networking to fill job vacancies when we have, these higher level skill positions that are left vacated for a long time. It becomes problematic. And but did get to look at their EMT program over there, which is pretty impressive. All the stuff they've got this $150,000 the dummy guy but the guy can bleed and sweat and everything else, so they can program all
That's
sorts
called a
of-
simulator.
Yeah, it's the real deal. I thought it was a real guy there, but he can do pretty much anything a real person does. So luckily they didn't surprise me on that. And then last thing I want to report on August 23rd, I had the Alaska Oil and Gas had their board meeting down here, and this is the second time they've had it in the Central Peninsula. And they have a breakfast and threw out an invite, so I was able to attend that and listen to some of the positive things that are going on in the oil and gas industry throughout the state, but in particularly in Cook Inlet here, which is pretty promising. So with that, we'll go to administration reports. City Manager, Acting City Manager, Mr. Ross.
Mayor, City Council, the city manager did leave me a few things to share with you, so I'll share what he left for me. The Kenai Silver Salmon Derby begins September 12th, and the staff of the chamber are actively working on that, as you heard earlier. This year will include a weigh station at the Eagle Rock Boat Launch on the final weekend of the Derby. That's September 15th through the 17th. Before, the only weigh-in station was at the Three Bears, I think. So now there'll be one at the dock there. The Derby's been building every year, and this year is no exception. The city has a high number of recruitments for positions right now, including the airport manager, a firefighter, the shop foreman, a library aide, an administrative assistant for planning, and a police officer. The other item he had is the Corps has reached out to tentatively schedule the signing of the project partnership agreement, the PPA for the Bluff Erosion Project, sometime during the first 2 weeks of October. So their staff are coordinating to set up that date, which hasn't actually been set yet, and to coordinate a signing ceremony for that. And the city manager should be back in the office next week. So that's all I have.
Any questions, the Acting City Manager? Seeing none, we'll go to City Attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I don't have anything to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the City Attorney? Seeing none, we'll go to the City Clerk. Ms. Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just to let everybody know, absentee voting will begin here at City Hall and at the Borough Building on September 18th, 2023. And on Friday, Deputy Clerk Thibodeau and I and our volunteers will be starting the cemetery imaging project in the cemetery. Hope for sunshine, because we went out and tested our apps last night in the rain, and the pictures are not good. And I'm available for questions.
Any questions, Ms. Sander? Seeing none, thank you. With that, we'll go to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to the council at this time? Councilmember or Curtin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, Acting Manager Ross gave the city manager's report. I actually did get an email correspondence today from the Corps with a tentative, and I haven't had an opportunity to review it with Mr. Eubanks. But they're telling me September 25th as a possible publicity date for a ribbon cutting. So I just wanted to have you keep that on your radar. It's not set. I literally just got it today. It hasn't been set in stone, but that's what I'm being told, and we're kind of passengers on this at the moment. So when Terry gets back, there'll be more to come on that. But that's what I'm hearing today, September 25th. It's a Monday.
Wonderful. So more to be determined. All right, thank you. It's great news. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? No hands raised. Seeing none, we'll go to council comments. Councilmember Doffett.
Just real quick, I will not be here the 20th meeting. I'll be out of town for that. And if they could bump it like the 26th, that'd be great. Just end of moose season and all. But other than that, nothing too pressing right now. I'm working on some interesting data that came in from the Wildwood Drive traffic counters, and we got some preliminary data that showed some pretty high numbers of traffic going into and from there. So if anybody wants to talk to me about that afterward, we can, and I should hopefully have final numbers and their final data hopefully by the end of the month. So maybe I'll try to put a little bit of a presentation or something together to show those numbers maybe in October or sometime when I get all that done. That's it.
Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I attended the Industry Appreciation Day. I believe it was August 19th, Saturday. It was a beautiful day, and it was a great turnout. And I just want to thank all the businesses that were there represented and participating, and just the great food that they all provided and the atmosphere. That event has really grown over the last several years.
Thank you. Councilmember Askin.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. September 2023 is Worker Health and Safety Month, sponsored by the American Industrial Hygiene Association. Their mission is empowering and advancing those who apply scientific knowledge to protect all workers and their communities from occupational and environmental hazards. Their overall objective is to help ensure that work-related occupational and environmental health and safety hazards are anticipated, eliminated, and controlled. This is meant to remind the public about the importance of having our industrial hygienists and health and safety professionals in both private and public sectors. Thanks to John Costin, Harbor and Planning and Zoning Commissioner, for reminding us that to stay safe, we must be diligent to the hazards around us. I got to attend the Triumvirate Theater groundbreaking. It was great, all the kids that were there. I also attended Industry Day, echoing Councilmember Sonart. It was a great day, lots of fun, and lots of kids went home with bikes. And then that night, we attended the food bank fundraiser, where it's all soup. They serve all different kinds of soup, and then you get to take a soup bowl home. That was really well attended. It was really nice. And the Challenger Learning Center is putting on a geocaching challenge. It was originally scheduled for September 23rd, but they've changed that to October 15th. So if you can get a group of 4 together for $500, you get a team and breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all kinds of fun activities. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just wanted to really highlight on the Industry Appreciation Day. Thank you to Mr. Pollard for his cars. I think I heard from everybody about how amazing his collection of cars were, and it was just great that he trucked every one of those in and trucked them all back out. Would also like to remind people to firewise your properties. I think after this last windstorm, I know I was without power for about 3.5 hours, multiple people without power. A lot of it was trees, dead trees. So can't encourage people enough to get out and get their properties firewised. We do have the Slash disposal site that's open Thursday through Sunday to utilize. My husband is working on the Kinnick site on Willow Street, so I've been every day getting to go and check out the Willow Street project. If you haven't, once you get to the airport, it gets a little mumble-jumbled from there on out. So I just encourage you not to take the cut-through loop on that. I know they're really pounding out that project, and the goal is to get that completed here in the next couple weeks. So that's looking good. And I just really would like to recognize, with 9/11 coming around the corner, we won't have a meeting, but I just would like to recognize all the lives that were lost on that tragic day, and those that were forever impacted. Another thing is I've been working with one of the local wrestling clubs. Kenai does not have a wrestling club, and they are losing out probably a good 100 kids being involved in the program. And it sounds like Nikiski is wanting to expand their program and do an A and a B location. A being out in Nikiski, and then offering and working with the city of Kenai to find space either with the rec center or with one of the schools where they would be able to offer another part of their club in the Kenai area so that those kids have the opportunity to wrestle, because not all kids want to or parents can't travel to Soldotna or Nikiski for the club. So it sounds like Nikiski is really going to try to come in and possibly offer an A-B to their club. Any kids that do it would be registered with the Nikiski club going forward. But that's their way of trying to bridge in and help Kenai get a program and get the youth involved. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Payson.
Thank you. Good meeting. Good night.
Thank you, Councilor Axon.
I won't be quite so brief. I was going to say that I followed the mayor around the other day, but I guess it was Councilmember Askin, because I went to the Triumphant groundbreaking also, and we've heard about that. That was wonderful. And then off to industry appreciation, like she did as well. And I was able to give away, or help give away, some of those bicycles, and those children were really happy. And even the ones that didn't, it was a lot of fun trying to break loose those T-shirts that were frozen. And then that evening, I went to the soup supper fundraiser for the food bank, and I think I had reminded Councilmember Askin about that during the day, so she was there also, and her husband, and that was a whole lot of fun. And also, I'm looking forward to, and it sounds like she's going to be there as well, as the Challenger Learning Center's got a fundraiser coming up and pretty soon. I think my wife's got tickets for that, so looking forward to that, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Seeing we have no executive session or pending items, seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.